Hi, my name is Travis Austin,
And this is Nathan Kurtz.
and we work with the New Boundary Technologies Support Department. Today, we're going to talk about Prism Asset Manager, particularly assets. Nathan?
So there are two primary different types of assets. There are scannable assets and there are non-scannable assets. Scannable assets would be an asset that we can scan over the network that would have an IP address range. So a computer, a switch, a printer, something along that nature. A non-scannable asset would be something that we want to keep track of but would not have an IP address. So something like a monitor or keyboards or mice or other such items. Today we're going to talk mostly about scanned assets. So in order to perform a network scan, first we need to configure a network scan. When I add a network scan, I can name what that network scan is called, and then I need to select a machine that has the Prism client on it that is going to perform the scan of my network. And then I would need to provide the IP address range that I want that computer to scan.
So Nate, one of the things you just said was you're going to supply a IP address that would, or a IP range that would be scanned. That makes it sound like you can't necessarily configure one scan to scan your entire enterprise. Would that be correct?
You can configure one scan to scan your entire enterprise. However, oftentimes if you have multiple buildings or different locations, you would want to set up different network scans to have a different agent scan a different section of your environment. Then the last thing that I need to do is add in some credentials that can be used to perform the scan.
Okay, so you're adding credentials for a particular domain. Is then are we then only going to scan that domain?
So if in your environment you have multiple domains, you could specify a forest admin level account if your separate domains have a trust relationship between them. If you have separate untrusted domains, then you would just need to add in the credentials for what your other domains would be. And then when we perform the scan, we will use both of these credentials to scan the various machines that we might find on the network. Additionally, we can also set up a schedule for the scan so that the scan will happen at an interval so that any new devices found on the network from the previous scan would be found, as well as setting up some other options for verifying that previously found machines are still on the network, as well as performing a completely entire new scan every time that the new scan is performed. Now, once a scan of the network has been performed, we will find that we then have assets listed under the Assets tab of the console.
Oh, wow, Nate, it looks like none of the assets that we found have names. Why would that be?
So the assets that we are seeing listed first in this list don't have a name, most likely because we did not specify an account that would have given us access to get further information about that device. However, as we scroll down, we will find other devices that the credentials that we did provide were acceptable by these machines, and we were able to pull in extra information about them.
So an example of a device that we might not be able to have credentials for, since we've already talked about supplying multiple credentials, would maybe be someone's cell phone that's connected to a wireless network in your enterprise?
Exactly. So now that we have assets under the Assets tab, I will note on the left-hand side that there are multiple ways that these assets can be grouped. One of the ways that devices will end up being grouped will be by asset type, so by computer or by firewall or mobile device or a switch or something similar to that. Additionally, you can also make your own asset types if you would want to. We also auto-sort devices that we find based on the manufacturer of the network interface card that was found in that device. So for example, here for this manufacturer, these 3 devices have a network interface card by 3Com Corporation.
So it's not necessarily a 3Com computer, it just happens to be a 3Com network card.
Exactly. Additionally, you can also make user-defined groups. Now, the groups and the devices that you would find in any user-defined group are not sorted or added to it automatically, but would need to be added by you manually. And then the last type of sorting that is performed is reviewed and non-reviewed assets. So when you take any particular asset and you have researched what that device is and have made the decision that this is a device that I know what it is and is allowed on the network, you can then mark it as reviewed. And then the devices that you have not reviewed yet show up under the unreviewed assets category. And so this would be a list of devices that you have either not yet had the chance to review or are a new item that was pulled in by the latest scan that was performed, and as such might be something that you would want to look into to determine what that device is.
So does that mean if I decided to not approve something, I'm actually kicking it off the network?
No, you're not.
So it just allows me to know that I have a little investigation to do to determine if the device that we're now seeing on the network is legitimately on our network.
Correct.
Well, that is our video about Prism Deploy Asset Manager, specifically assets, both scanned and unscanned.